surprised at the time. But after getting over the surprise that it existed in that form, it wasn't surprising because Craig had, I mean, whilst he was working for BDO as a security audit lead or head of that security audit practice in Sydney, he had done previous work for Lassiter's Casino in Central Australia because one of the guys that was working for me in Sydney had very close ties to Lassiter's Casino. And when they found out that Craig Wright was part of the BDO audit team that was doing our pre-IPO due diligence report, they said to me, he's the right guy to be doing this. He knows this industry. He's got an incredible reputation with the people at Lassiter's, and we're going to get a good job done. So, you know, what he did for Lassiter's was both security work, audit work, and he also helped them with some of their internal systems controls and firewall implementations and how to address access from particular countries and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you know, he was doing this work for me, and I was working with a company called Centrebet. Now, in 2015, late 2014, early 2015, I found out that he also did work in Costa Rica for companies that were running card rooms and poker networks in Costa Rica. And so I guess the fact that some code and poker tables popped up in there for unknown purposes to me, it probably shouldn't be surprising that it did because of the industries that he was involved with.
Sure. Well, I mean, and like you said, it's such an obvious use case. Like, you need money in, money out. Bypassing the banks is a great thing for casinos to be able to do, for online gaming specifically. But yeah, I guess it shouldn't be surprised. It seems like quite an obvious use case. Like, hey, we've gotten around or created a solution, anyways, to make some of this easier for the businesses. But I guess it's a question I'll have to ask Craig, because it's been bugging me for the last month or so, because it occurred to me that maybe I've been thinking about it backwards. So I would love to hear the actual thought that went into that. We have a question here from Doug Boy, but a little bit of pretext. I had an interesting conversation, most of which I was asked to keep confidential with Ian Grigg when we were in Zurich. And he mentioned very much that Craig was the center point of the team, but it was a team that created Bitcoin, that it was sort of two people. And then for a while it was sort of three. And now it's just Craig. That very much quickly after release that basically everybody either died or is in hiding. And so I'm curious, do you know the other members of the team, or is this a contentious concept here?
I can see
on your face.
I'm still alive.
Interesting.
No, it's not a contentious topic for me to discuss. In all honesty, and cross my heart, in 2008, 2007, Craig never ever discussed the roles of any other people with me. At other stages, he certainly has. So he's described, and let me say that there is not a hesitation in me saying that Craig Wright was the instigator, the architect, and the prime mover in what was developed in the form of Bitcoin. But he has discussed with me privately, and I won't drop all the names. I mean, he openly discussed Ian Grigg with me at times. He openly discussed Hal Finney's role in helping him with some, elliptic curve math, and he certainly discussed with me the vibrant discussions and debates that he had with Hal about securing the network from denial of service attacks, which resulted in him conceding and implementing the 1 megabyte block limit. There were other people that did mathematical proofs for him for certain pieces of the design. But there was no one that he's ever discussed with me or has come to light in any discussions I've had that you would consider to play a role other than a piecemeal role. I mean, even Dave Kleiman, he discussed with me, the support that Dave gave him as a mate, and also some assistance in reviewing documents and editing, to make things more readable. But outside of those types of relationships with individuals, whether they be mathematicians, whether they be security people, network people, or else, I'm not aware of anyone that played a pivotal role.
Sure. Yeah, I asked Craig once, this is probably 2 years ago now, I said, would it be fair to say that you were the architect and perhaps there were bricklayers and that sort of thing? And then depending who you ask, like if some third party says, well, who built this cathedral? Well, the architect would say, well, it's my design. But the bricklayer can also say, well, I certainly have my hand.
Yeah, I laid bricks along the east wall, and I put the windows in on the first floor. I'm sure that, I mean, Bitcoin was a massive undertaking, and he definitely, as far as I know, took advice and interacted with people who were significant specialists in specific topic areas.
Yeah. Well, even Craig has mentioned Dave Rees as well, as a person that.
Professor Rees. I've seen communications, 6 or 7 years, 6 years ago, between Dave and Rees on some specific proofs that he asked Rees to evaluate and so on and so forth.
Sure.
So, I don't know how many people might be on that list. And he actually went to a point with me in late 2014, early 15, when, he qualified it by saying the majority of people didn't even know what they were working on. The majority of people were asked to do, you send out a specification for someone to give you a window with 3 panes in it and a sliding piece and so forth, and they manufacture it and send it back to you, and you go, thank you very much, and they wouldn't have a clue what building that ends up in.
Sure. No, that's fair. No, that makes perfect sense. And really, people that haven't worked in a development environment don't really understand. I mean, especially big software projects, people that work in corporate software have this all the time where, I don't know, I did 1,000 hours of something, I don't even know where it ended up. But that sort of compartmentalization actually makes a lot of sense from a security standpoint too. So knowing Craig's background in cybersecurity and that kind of thing, it actually makes sense to sort of delegate stuff out in a containerized fashion like that. So that's
Craig also, as the architect, took a lot of pre-existing pieces and integrated them in a very special way to create a full solution that didn't exist before. And I had never met Ian prior to last week here in Switzerland. So, I grabbed him and said, mate, over the years, I've heard so much about you from Craig. And, I think it was the, triple entry accounting concepts that Ian authored the paper on. That paper played a very significant role in adapting or crafting Craig's thinking and logic around the role of the Bitcoin ledger.
No, it's fascinating. Well, and that's a big reason why I actually asked Ian exactly that. I said, "Hey, Ian, like I'm Kurt. I'd never really met him either. We had talked briefly a couple times online, but I said the same thing. I said, "Hey, I've always had this nagging theory that your work in triple entry accounting was such an inspiration to Bitcoin, at least in theory. Like, what is your relation to this whole story with Craig? Obviously, you've backed up Craig nonstop since 2015 when that all became a thing, and he just he rolls his eyes and he's very soft spoken and confident, and I'm just like, man, did I just I don't even know the right question to ask a man of that position. Like, he knows so much.
Yeah, I did a short CoinGeek TV piece in the lunch break on day 2 with Ian, and he spoke in that interview about a meeting that he had with Craig in London, and it was during that meeting that he formed an opinion that, beyond doubt, that Craig was absolutely Satoshi, and it was interesting hearing him recount that. That experience, and for any of the viewers, they should find that online and listen to it.
Yeah. Well, and Ian's blogs are very enlightening as well. He's very gives information that I hadn't seen elsewhere, and now he gets referenced occasionally, but most of the stuff, even in his original 2 blogs from 2015, really haven't been repeated by almost anybody else. So which brings me to 2015. So I think 2015 is this massive pivotal year for Bitcoin, for Craig, just a whole bunch of things. I think a lot of people don't realize how quickly a bunch of dominoes fell between the ATO raid, Craig's doxing by Wired and Gizmodo, and then Gavin coming out and having seen the signing, and then Gavin being removed from Bitcoin Core. All of these things happened within like 2 or 3 weeks of one another, and
yeah, probably 3 months, maybe 4 months. Okay. Extend across all that. I was living in the Philippines, and I had previously prior to that lived in the UK, and Craig and I hadn't been communicating directly with each other since the beginning of 2010, and he called me in late 2014 and wanted to have a discussion with me about, his businesses and, the state of play in Australia. And he did that on the basis that he considered me someone that he felt he could trust and rely on to give him, advice. And, I happened to be in Australia 3 or 4 weeks after that, and he and I met and had hamburger for lunch, and then we had dinner that night and continued discussions. And I got the full download on his problems in Australia. And I said to him at the time, I can give you advice, but I need to ask you. The advice is only as good as its relevance as to what he wants to achieve in life. And he said, mate, I don't like running companies. I'm no good at it. I just want to be a guy that creates a shitload of stuff and pass it on to people who run businesses and work with my inventions and so on and so forth. And it was out of that conversation, N-Chain was actually born on the 29th of June 2015. And the plan then was that the agreement that was already in place on that date was that Craig and his family would relocate to London, that we would set up this business that was yet to be named, but it was called Newco. And there would be a research centre in the UK. We would hire a whole research team. Before he ran into his problems in Australia, he had 45 people working in his office at North Wright. And wow. by the time I got on the scene, there were none left. There were a couple that came back,